Hi there, we're Ariel.
And Michelle,
And we're
and
the
we're the
Board
Board
Game
Game Tutors.
Tutors.
Today we're going to be talking to you about the Benders. They're a faction from the Summoner Wars Master Set, and this is one of our advanced concepts videos for Summoner Wars. So this is the first card that you start with in your faction deck for the Benders. It has the starting setup for the Benders. On the other side, we can see all of the event cards that are in this deck, which we'll be talking about later, and it also reminds you of every step that you take on every turn. Then we have a wall from the Benders faction. And here's Tacullu, the summoner of the Benders. So let's look at his statistics and his special ability. Of course, he doesn't cost anything to summon because he starts out on the board, so we just see a lightning bolt in that spot. There you go. And then he rolls 2 dice for his attack value, and he's a ranged fighter. And he has 5 hit points. All right, so let's read Tacullu's special ability. It's called Counter Summon. Once per turn, at the end of your attack phase, you may choose a unit within 3 clear straight line spaces of Tacullu and spend a number of magic points equal to the chosen unit's summon cost to discard that unit. So, as the name implies, counter summon means that you can basically get rid of one of the enemy units, if it's on your side of the board. Or does it say on your side of the board? Or
It doesn't matter.
It just has to be near Tacullu. So if he's moved closer to the other side, that works too. So here we have a Deceiver that's within 3 straight line units of Tacullu. Normally, a Deceiver probably wouldn't be your enemy, although you could be playing another Bender faction. But in this case, we're pretending it's an enemy unit. So Tacullu would just need the number of magic points that Deceiver costs. And if we look at it, we see that it costs 1 magic to summon. So he would be able to spend, and this is at the end of his attack phase, he would spend 1 magic point. So you go from magic to discard there. And then that Deceiver would be gone from the board.
And we go to discard.
That's right.
Well, we'll explain more about the Deceiver.
Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. That's counter summon.
Another thing that is important with Tacullu, let's say, for example, let's pretend this Deceiver was, so like I said, like Michelle said, it can be up to 3 spaces away, so anywhere here, here, or there. And obviously it counts in all directions, 3 to the right, 3 to the left,
just a straight line.
But one important thing to note is, let's say, for example, Tacullu rolled 2 dice against this Deceiver. Okay, they were both successful, but let's say they were both 2s. He did not successfully kill that Deceiver, so he has the option of spending 1 magic point to kill that Deceiver because he doesn't want that common unit next to him. Or let's pretend she was a champion for the enemy army. Then, if your attack failed and you want to make sure that they're gone and don't attack your summoner, you can use counter summon for that purpose. And also, let's pretend, for example, this was a champion from the enemy army, and let's say the summon cost was 7, and it was a really strong champion that had many, many hit points. So Tacullu doesn't feel like he can take on that champion. One thing he can do if he is in a really bad situation, if he has enough magic, that's a big deal. If he had 7 magic, he could use counter summon to get rid of that champion. It would be discarded. It would no longer be a threat on the board. But it comes at the cost of spending all that magic.
That's right.
So, what?
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the common units for the Benders. So here's the Deceiver that we were just using in our example. She costs 1 magic to summon, as we said. She rolls 1 die, and she's a ranged fighter. In fact, all of the units in the Benders are ranged fighters. I think even all the champions. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, and so the Deceiver's special ability is called Stun. Common enemy units that begin a turn adjacent to this Deceiver cannot move or attack during that turn. So, we haven't really talked yet about the theme of the Benders faction, but basically they're known for being pretty obnoxious in the perspective of the other side, because the Benders do all kinds of things that basically try to interfere with their enemy, like stopping you from doing what you want to do, in addition to, of course, attacking you.
So another example here, this Deceiver's stun ability. Let's say, for example, the Bender player went first. Obviously, I'm using a Bender unit there, but let's pretend it wasn't a Bender. During the Bender player's turn, this Deceiver came forward twice. It is now adjacent to this breaker, let's pretend it's not a bender unit, it's just something else. And so this deceiver is adjacent to this breaker, and the bender player ends their turn like that. Now, when it's the enemy army's turn, this breaker cannot move and cannot attack. So that's very annoying for the opposite player because this unit is basically dead weight. You can't do anything with this unit. Even if you brought another unit and killed this deceiver, the rules say if it begins a turn adjacent to this deceiver, it cannot move or attack during that turn. So even if you remove this deceiver, that breaker is unable to move and unable to attack for that whole turn. So that is not very helpful for the enemy army because, yeah, that's...
You disabled one of their units.
Yeah. And the nice thing about it, though, is this only affects commons, so champions are not affected by deceivers, and neither are summoners.
Okay. Here's another common unit from the benders. She's called a breaker. She costs 2 magic and rolls 1 die with a, of course, ranged attack, and she has just 1 hit point. I think that's another common thing. All the bender common units only have 1 hit point. Okay, the breaker's special ability is called Memory Break. After attacking an enemy unit with this breaker, you may reveal the top card of an opponent's draw pile. You may then discard that card unless its owner pays 1 magic to place it on the bottom of their draw pile. Okay, so the breaker references the draw pile. And the breaker's ability comes into effect whenever they attack an enemy unit. So you can't use this when you if you choose to attack your own unit. That wouldn't help you be able to do this memory break ability. It only comes when you attack an enemy unit. And also that would be a unit, so not a wall, because walls are not considered to be units.
So units are basically summoners, champions, and commons.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, if this breaker attacked this deceiver, and the deceiver was an enemy deceiver, the breaker would only roll 1 die. So that was an unsuccessful attack. I only rolled a 2.
Mm-hmm.
But since the breaker attacked that deceiver, you can discard the top card of the enemy draw pile, unless, like the card says, unless they give up 1 magic to keep that card. And the big disadvantage to them now is it's on the very bottom of their stack. So that's important because, basically, you thin out your opponent's deck because your opponent's not going to feel like they can spend 1 magic every single time to save the card that they want, because they don't want to save every single card because that's an inefficient use of their magic. And also, that's important as well because they have to pay to keep that person or that whatever that card is. So this basically she another name I would use for her is the demoralizer, because you can't really fight much her special ability, although she does die after 1 attack, so that is one main disadvantage.
After 1 hit.
And so and she only does 1 attack, so she's not very strong. Basically you use her to play mind games with your opponent.
All right, and then the third and final common unit is called a controller. Controllers cost 2 magic. They have an attack value of 2, which is ranged, and they have 1 hit point. The special ability for the controller is Telekinetic Blast. After attacking with this controller, you may choose a unit that is within 2 spaces of this controller. Move the chosen unit up to 1 space. A controller cannot be moved using Telekinetic Blast. So there are several different ways that controllers can use their Telekinetic Blast, and we won't be able to illustrate all of them. And one of the fun things about the game is kind of coming up with different cool ways that you can use the controller's ability. But this does happen after any time you attack with the controller. So you could, if you wanted to, if you thought it was beneficial, you could attack your own unit, you could attack your own wall, you could attack your opponent's wall, you could attack your opponent's unit. So it's after any attack done by the controller.
So one example that we came up with would be, let's say that breaker is an enemy unit, this deceiver is a friendly, and obviously the controller is a friendly. So this is the controller's wall. He might, because he cannot reach, let's say he originally started out here and he moved here. Now he couldn't possibly reach that breaker to attack it, but he can roll 2 dice. So obviously against his own wall, which isn't the best plan, but it is something you can do in a pinch. You would put 2 wounds on your own wall, then. Ideally, you would get none, because you hope for bad rolls in that case. And then he can move 1 unit within 2 spaces of him. So it could be a unit here, it could be a unit there, because you have to count the spaces. This deceiver is within 2 spaces. Now that controller can move that deceiver here. This breaker is now immobilized for the next turn. And so, yeah, you can use your imagination to figure out what would be a useful way to make use of this. Sometimes you move it, you use his Telekinetic Blast to move the deceiver forward, or move a breaker forward. Sometimes you use that to push another unit forward far enough so that way they can attack a unit, or basically anything along those lines.
Also, when the controller moved this deceiver, if the deceiver hadn't attacked yet, then they could attack the breaker since they're adjacent to it.
Right, exactly. That's one of the other major things that you could do with it as well.
Okay, so those were the 3 common units. Now we're going to talk about the Bender champions.
Okay, and I'm going to talk about these. So the first one, her name is Sorgwyn. She rolls 3 dice. She costs 5 magic to summon. She's ranged, and she has 3 hit points. So as you can tell, some of the champions, they have more hit points than the commons do, but they're still really, really weak. The main thing you want to do with this deck is to focus on playing mind games with your opponent, trick them into thinking you're doing something, but actually do something completely different to them. And Telepathic Command. That's her ability. At the end of your attack phase, you may choose a common unit you control that is within 3 spaces of Sorgwyn. You may immediately attack with the chosen unit, even if the unit already attacked on this turn. So, as you can tell, Sorgwyn is a pain in the neck because you can attack with your common units twice. So,
with one of them.
With one of them. That's within 3 spaces. So, for example, with this breaker, you could do memory break twice, coupling this with that. Or let's say you just want to go for straight just strength, pretty much. You can roll with a controller twice. So you can roll 4 dice instead of just 2. And then that doesn't mean anything for Sorgwyn. You could still attack with Sorgwyn, and she rolls 3 dice. So you can be throwing a lot of dice at an enemy army, and particularly scary champion or something like that. But you do obviously have to be careful. She only has 3 hits before she dies. Okay. Then Gul'dun. He rolls 2 dice. He costs 5 to summon, ranged, and he has 4 hit points. So he's slightly stronger. His special ability is Mind Capture. When an enemy common or champion unit would be destroyed by an attack from Gul'dun, this guy, you may ignore any wound markers that unit would receive from Gul'dun's attack and take control of that unit. So this is another major feature of this deck. You can take control of the enemy army's units. And it says here, you can do commons or champions. So you're not limited, really, except
for the summoner.
Certain other things, like the summoner in the future. Also, conjurations aren't vulnerable to this as well, because it says a common or a champion unit. And conjurations are something completely separate. But we'll talk about that when we get to that. So let's say, for example, so let's pretend Sorgwyn was the enemy champion that Gul'dun was fighting, and she already had 1 hit point done to her. Now, Gul'dun would roll 2 dice. Okay, that didn't work, but let's say he rolled a 5 and a 3. He would kill her because she only has 3 hit points. But now that he has basically destroyed her, you have the choice as a Bender player. You can turn this unit around, add no more damage to it. It is now under your control. And so you can do that against commons and champions. Against really weak commons, this is a really useful skill because you only have to get 1 hit on them, and then you just turn that person around and send it against your enemy. Champions, that's really useful as well too, because now you can make use of that champion's special skill and their dice rolling and whatnot. So Gul'dun is a very powerful character. You can get, especially if you can convert a bunch of weak common units using Gul'dun, that will definitely help you turn the tide in a given match. And lastly, we have Kalal. She rolls 3 dice. She costs 7 to summon, so the largest, obviously, out of the whole deck. She's a ranged fighter, and she has 5 hit points. So, as you can tell, with Thorgwen, she had 3 hit points. Gul'dun has 4. Kalal has 5. She's very expensive. She does roll 3 dice, though, so that's pretty awesome. But don't be confused here. All of your champions, Gul'dun, Thorgwen, and Kalal, they will all be targets when your opponent's fighting you because their special skills are really powerful. They roll a lot of dice, and they're all ranged, and they don't have that many hit points. So you fully expect your opponent to come at you with everything that they have because they do not want these champions messing with them. So her special ability is called Glimpse the Future. Once per turn, after moving Kalal, you may choose a player. Look at the top 4 cards of that chosen player's draw pile. Place 2 of the cards on the bottom of that player's draw pile and 2 of them on top. So, whenever she moves, she can rearrange the top 4 cards of a person's draw pile. So, it says choose a player. So this is important because, let's say, for example, in a 4-player game, that's where choose a player would obviously matter. You could choose either of your opponents. I don't think you would use this on your ally. That would be
Actually,
kind of strange.
I think you might, because you might want to look at their cards and see, oh, this is a better one, let's put it on top.
Right, true. So yeah, you could use this as an offensive weapon to mess with your opponent's decks. And let's say you come across your opponent's champion. Okay, well, you're not going to get this guy. I'm going to take him and put him on the bottom of your draw pile. So you don't know where he is in your deck. Like you can only assume I'm messing with you and doing evil things to your deck and just rearranging things. So that way you're not going to get the beneficial cards that you need. But it's only 4 cards. So you take 2, put them on the top, take 2, put them on the bottom. So yeah, you can use it offensively, but you can also, in a 4-player match, use it to help your ally.
It seems kind of risky because you have to put 2 cards on the bottom.
Now, let's say if you drew 4 really helpful cards for your ally, you don't want to send 2 of them to the bottom, so it might not be that wise.
And they're all near the top already, so it seems unlikely that you'd really want to do it that way.
And obviously, Glimpse the Future is not that useful when the draw piles are significant, like when there's still close to 30 cards in the draw pile, because so you want to use Kalal somewhere close to the beginning of the match, so this can actually be useful. But towards the end of the match, she's not that useful, aside from all of her regular skills of rolling 3 dice at ranged.
Yeah, and she does this every time she moves, so if you choose to, every time you move. So you don't have to succeed in rolling dice or anything like that. You just have to move her.
Right. So yeah, but you do have to move her. So one thing an opponent might use against Kalal would be to surround her with units to attack her, obviously, for one thing. But 2, if you surround her completely, then she can't mess with your deck because she can't move then.
Right.
So like if you made it such that Kalal was here, and then you brought all your units across the board, so she was surrounded. Sorry. There. And here. And here. So this would be an example of surrounding her so she can't move. So on her next turn, even if you don't kill her, because you don't get enough successful die rolls, she will not be able to do her special skill. But you probably are afraid of her 3 dice more than anything else, so that's probably why you would try to kill her.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so now on to event cards. The first one we're going to talk about is called Magic Drain. This one appears in some other decks, like one of the decks it's in is the Guild Dwarves. So Magic Drain says, choose an opponent. If you have fewer units on the battlefield than that opponent does, remove up to 2 cards from the top of that opponent's magic pile and place them on top of your magic pile. So this is sometimes called a catch-up event. It's going to help you when your opponent or opponents have more units on the board than you. It's going to make it a little easier for you to summon more units to add to the board because you're able to steal their magic so that they can't use it and you do get to use it. So it says choose an opponent. So of course, if you're in a 2-player match, you only have one opponent. But if you're in one of those 4-player matches that people sometimes do, then you would choose either opponent to look at. And if you have fewer units on the battlefield than that opponent does. So it's possible, I guess, if one of the opponents maybe doesn't have more units than you, but the other does, then it still works.
Yeah. And you wouldn't really want to do this to your ally because then you're kind of stealing magic from your ally.
Yeah, and it does say choose an opponent, so yeah, they know you don't want to choose.
Yeah.
You don't want to choose your ally.
Right. So yeah.
So that's Magic Drain.
And also, it's nice too because, like we said, your commons in the Bender army, they only take one hit before they die. So let's say, for example, your opponent kills 2 of your Bender units on their turn. You can use Magic Drain on your turn because 1, you have fewer units now because they killed 2 of your units, and hopefully you can use this card to steal those units that they got from you back and put them into your magic pile to build for something else.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe you have 2 of these in your deck, but your main limitation with Magic Drain is you have to have the Magic Drain card in your 5-card hand. So if you don't have it in your hand, you can't use it, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you have to get it at the right time when you have fewer units than your opponent.
So yeah, it's not a guaranteed catch-up mechanic because the situation has to match.
Yeah, and there are 2, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now we're going to talk about Mimic. There are 3 copies of this card in your deck. Choose an opponent and look at the chosen opponent's hand. You may choose an event card, excluding any type of wall, from the chosen opponent's hand and place it in your hand. So basically here you're stealing your opponent's event card. And sometimes you're going to look at your opponent's hand and they won't have any event cards, but at least it did benefit you in terms of now you know exactly what's in their hand, which is normally secret information.
Yeah. So yeah, sometimes you'll just use Mimic because you don't know if they have an event card. Obviously, the best use of it is when you can steal an event card from them, especially if it's an event card that your opponent only has 1 copy of, because now they can't use that event card, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. But the other primary use of this is you're basically spying. You can look at their hand and see, oh, they have a champion in their hand. Okay, they have 5 and then you can look at their side of the board. Oh, looks like they have 5 magic. They have enough to summon that champion. Okay, I need to get ready for that. Mm-hmm. Or something else too, like let's say you see they have 3 event cards in their hand. Okay, now you know what to expect. Mm-hmm. Because you've seen the 3 event cards.
Yeah, and so you'd be able to take 1 event card that you saw and put it in your hand. Now, some of those event cards you're going to be able to use. You really have to look carefully at the wording. So, like, if you're playing another deck that has Magic Drain in it and you're able to take their Magic Drain card, then you can use it. There might be some event cards that you're not really going to be able to imitate because the wording is so specific. Like, a lot of the Cave Goblin faction event cards, they say something very specific about using your Cave Goblin units. So, if you don't have Cave Goblin units, you're not going to be able to mimic that event card. Right. But in that case, you'd still get the card into your hand and be able to build it as magic.
So let's pretend this was a Cave Goblin card or any event card that's not a wall. You can't steal walls. Any event card
that doesn't apply to you.
That doesn't apply to you. Let's say your hand was here, and you're like, okay, well, I can't use this for anything else. I'm just going to build it for magic at the end of my turn.
Yeah, so that still helps you.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about Magic Drain specifically because Magic Drain would be useful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that was Mimic.
Okay, then Mind Control. There are 3 copies of Mind Control in this deck. Choose a common unit on your side of the battlefield. You may spend a number of magic points equal to the chosen unit's summon cost to take control of that unit. So it has to be on your side of the battlefield.
So see where the midline is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they have to cross that threshold. Here, if they were right here, that does not count. That is still your enemy side of the board. Once they have crossed this line, they are ready to be mind controlled.
Okay.
And so, yeah, you can use this to steal, really, like I said, Gul'dan can take over common units of your enemy army, but this one, it's a definitive thing. With Gul'dan, you have to roll 2 dice. If you kill them, then you can control them. But with this one, you just spend the magic, they're yours. So yeah, you can steal a common unit that has 3 hit points. Use them as your puppet, basically.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and so that's pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
Last card, even more straightforward than that.
A Hero is Born. Search your draw pile for a champion card. Reveal the card, then place the card in your hand and shuffle your draw pile.
Okay.
So this card makes it easy to find a champion. If you haven't gotten the champion you want when you get this event card, you can simply look in your draw pile over here. And you can look through and find the champion that you want and take it out. And then, of course, you shuffle the deck so that you don't know everything else that's, the order that it's coming in.
Mm-hmm. And also, you have to reveal the card. So you have to tell your opponent. I just drew Goldoon, because you basically can pick and choose. You could pick, if you had Kolal, Sorgwen, and Goldoon still in your draw deck, then you could look through your deck. Okay, I want Goldoon. So you take Goldoon out, you shuffle your deck again, and then you would show your opponent, I have Goldoon, and you put it in your hand. So
And there's just one hero, a hero was born event card.
And my personal preference with this card is, unless you really are in a particular situation and you really need a hero right here, right now, and you don't know where your hero is, you haven't drawn any hero. So it says a hero is born, but really it means a champion is born, not common. Yeah, you can't use this. It's not a common is born. So yeah, so I would use this card primarily. Like I'd say now, maybe like 80% of the time, maybe even more. I would use this at the end of my turn. So I went through all the steps. We're on step 6, build magic. It goes to my magic. Because personally, I prefer having magic in my hand to summon a hero rather than using this to get the hero into my hand. Because as you can tell with several of the cards in this deck, magic is important, and you need to have magic in your hand, in your magic pile to use things.
Right, because once you get that champion in your hand, you still have to be able to summon it before you can use it.
Right.
Okay, so that's the Benders faction from the Summoner Wars Master Set. Let us know if you have any questions about it or any comments, and we'll look forward to seeing you in our other videos. Thanks so much for watching.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
All right, bye.